My name is Daniel Kingery. I am presently at 820 Vermont Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C. at the corner of the Veterans Building where the McPherson Square Station is. And they've already posted the area that October 2nd. They will be by to try to clean up the area. The website is to teach us how we are supposed to be controlling the powers of our government, something we have not been doing very well at all since July 4th, 1776. We've had a great plan with the unanimous declaration that we've unfortunately been taught to refer to as the Declaration of Independence. That declaration is how we are supposed to be controlling the powers of our government. And if I could only get one thing across, it is that we, the people, are the ones who, well, like I've said already, responsible for controlling our government, but it's our vote count, our actual vote count, that makes all of the difference. So I usually like to ask people whether or not they think every registered voter votes. To that, almost everybody says no. Some of them even say they did not vote and they were registered. So I usually like to see how much they would place a value on their education. So I say, how much would you like to wager if you were in Vegas, if you were a gambling person, on your answer that no, not all registered voters vote. Most of them say they'd bet everything. And I said, you would lose everything. The Declaration says governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. As a citizen, you have every right to not participate in voting. I'll kind of wait for some of these loud noises of the train to go by. And we're going to get somebody in the background here probably, unless we want to wait for them to go by too. Okay. So when it says governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed in the Declaration, if there's 100 registered voters, whoever or whatever is on the ballot has to get more than 50% of the total number of registered voters. In this example, 51 or more consenting votes. But what we've been taught, which is incorrect, we have been taught that if 60 of them do not submit a ballot, then we just have to get the majority of the remaining 40. But that is not true. The consent of the governed never changes. The total body of registered voters is what we are always supposed to go by, the majority of that total. So when 60 to 70% of the total number of registered voters do not submit a ballot, then everything on those ballots had to fail for lack of consent. So if we look back at the voting record of the majority of the total number of registered voters over the past few decades, we will find out that practically all of the people in our elected offices today never received enough consenting votes to be legitimately sworn into office. In many cases, they simply received one more vote than nothing, which is why we are in the mess we are in now. Our ignorance makes our politicians, what do they call? Ignorance is bliss. Our ignorance makes our politicians blissful.
So one question that I do have is, what can we do to get it started? And what is the action that we can do now to make an impact?
The most important thing we can do to get it started is to start re-educating each other with respect to how our system is supposed to work. Not what we're taught about how it is being practiced today. For example, the Declaration is the contract between you and I, and the Constitution is the contract between us and our government officers. We ultimately are responsible for enforcing those contracts, one among ourselves, and then the other among our politicians in office. If we don't hold them accountable, they're not going to hold themselves accountable. So the first thing we can do is to re-educate each other with respect to how we are supposed to hold each other accountable with the terms of the Declaration, and then educate each other by unifying with each other how we hold our government officials accountable to the tune of treason when they violate the Constitution. So I've already talked about how our votes are supposed to be counted. The next thing is we actually have to enforce them. And remember, we have 60 to 70% of the total number of registered voters already to work on this, because they are the ones who did not submit consenting ballots. They refuse to even vote for the lesser of evils. That is a patriotic vote in and of itself. But we are taught, conditioned or indoctrinated, if you will, that those who don't submit ballots are unpatriotic, they're lazy, they're apathetic. But why should you submit a ballot to consent to the lesser of evils when the Constitution in Article 3, Section 3 calls that treason by adhering to and giving aid and comfort to our own domestic enemies in our government, who pass unconstitutional laws, enforce them, and put people in prison for merely exercising their rights and violating an unconstitutional law. This could be a whole nother segment about how our judicial system is supposed to work. But what we can do, one, like I said, is educate each other. If you're not sure about how to go about it, the website, cleanhonestgovernment.com, and then some of the videos on the TikTok and YouTube channel are designed to teach us how to go about this. But we have to realize, first of all, that we are a unified nation. Look at that 60 to 70% of registered voters who do not submit ballots. They cross all political divides: black, white, rich, poor, religious, non-religious, etc., etc. That is unity at its finest. 60 to 70% is a large majority when we enforce it. So, if you get a chance on some of the other signs, like the Kingery 2024 President of the United States of America right up front there, we should be doing recall elections. And then it's never too late to start, but never starting is too late. If we don't start working on this today, right now, it's just going to get worse next week, next month, next year, and for the children who are should be already preparing for the evils that are coming their way, because we did nothing so far. But today is the day we start. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. Start passing this information along to your contacts. Get them talking, whether they like it or not, whether you like it or not. Pass it around. Get people at least discussing it. That is how we improve the situation. We have the authority to recall any and every person in government, especially when they did not get the majority of the total number of registered voters' consent, because they are occupying that office in a treasonous activity, in violation against the Declaration and our sovereign vote. Then we have the right and the duty to remove all the unconstitutional activity. This is our job as United States Americans, to control our government. The government is there to equally secure everybody's rights. Not mine over yours or ours over theirs, but equally everyone's. Because your rights and my rights list is identical. We're just going to choose different rights off of the list to exercise. And if we do choose some of the same ones, one of us is going to value that particular right more or less than the other. There's nothing wrong with that. But we are supposed to help each other, protect each other's rights. Recall elections are the way to make things happen now, today. At the local level, you start circulating petitions to remove the politician who is in office. Some cities, counties, and states have certain rules and regulations to follow to supposedly make it legitimate, but as long as you have the majority of the total number of registered voters' signatures on a petition ballot, if you will, because we the people are not obligated to follow the government's rules with regard to how our elections are supposed to take place. As long as we have the majority of the total number of registered voters signing signature ballots, once we have that majority and it is verified, then we enforce it with that majority. And we should be able to do this without violence, but as we know with King George III, who refused to give up his unjust power, and fall in line with the constitutions that they had in place at the time, we can expect some really more resistance from our unconstitutional government officials. But as long as we stand firm and are willing to risk everything that we possess and all that we are, our lives, our fortunes, and our honor, which is our nation's pledge at the end of the unanimous declaration for the equal security of everyone's rights, our government will be the one that fears us and not us fearing the government. Questions about the Constitution or the Declaration and how it's supposed to work, and I'm sleeping, feel free to wake me up for that purpose. This way, because that is exactly what I'm here for, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you don't want to wake me up and you feel uncomfortable, take that as a measurement of how serious or not you think the situation is. Because if you're not willing to risk anything to wake me up, to get the questions answered and to get this information out there, you don't think our nation is in very serious trouble. And it is. That's why I volunteered to be out here 24/7. Yes, I am going to sleep some time of the day or night, and I don't know when you're going to come by, and you may not know when you're going to stop by. So it's hard to schedule sleep around that. I'm going to drop off and sleep whenever I get the chance. And if you happen to be by as soon as I drop off or after I've been asleep for a while, who cares? I'm going to get sleep one way or the other sooner or later. So please, if you got questions and you stop by, do not waste your trip. Wake me up and we'll get it taken care of.